The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the floating seats that surrounded the central platform. Their voices mixed together in a symphony of clicks, whistles, and strange sounds that the translation computers worked hard to convert into understandable words. At the center of it all, a holographic display showed the blue-green world of Kepler 442b. The peaceful Villani colony that called this planet home was now under attack. The images were terrible to watch. Burning cities, fleeing civilians, and the dark shapes of enemy ships filling the sky. Taemin sat in the human section, his weathered hands folded in his lap. He had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 15 years. In that time, he had seen many debates and many arguments. But nothing quite like this. The Zrathi Empire had moved faster than anyone expected. Their insect-like warriors had swept down from space and taken control of most of the planet in just 2 days. The Villani were not fighters. They were farmers and artists, scientists and teachers. They had joined the Galactic Council because they believed in peace and cooperation. Now they were paying the price for that belief. Council leader Morthak, a tall being with crystal-like skin, called for order. The noise in the hall slowly died down as all eyes turned to the central platform. "We have received multiple distress calls from the Villani colony," Morthak announced. His voice was clear and strong, carrying easily through the vast chamber. "The situation is grave. The Zrathi have taken control of all major population centers. They are forcing the Villani to work in the mines, extracting valuable minerals for the Empire." A holographic image appeared above the platform. It showed a Villani family being herded into a transport vehicle by Zrathi soldiers. The insect-like aliens were twice the size of the gentle Villani, with thick armor plating and powerful weapons. The fear in the Villani faces was clear to see. Representative Kelvani of the Murtai people raised one of her tentacle-like arms. The aquatic being's skin shimmered with patterns of blue and green as she spoke. "Perhaps we could negotiate with the Zrathi. They are known to accept tribute payments in exchange for peace. If we could gather enough resources." "Tribute?" The voice came from the Ithoni section. Representative Thyara's feathers ruffled with emotion. "You want to reward them for their aggression? This will only encourage more attacks on peaceful worlds. Then what do you suggest?" Kelvani's patterns shifted to darker colors. "The Zrathi have 300 warships in that system. They have been planning this attack for months. Any military response would result in massive casualties." The debate continued for over an hour. Each species had their own ideas about how to handle the crisis, but none of them involved actually fighting the Zrathi. The Kethvar wanted to impose economic sanctions. The Threnodi suggested sending medical supplies to help treat the wounded. The Roxani proposed a diplomatic mission to negotiate for better treatment of the prisoners. Taemin listened to it all in silence. He had heard these same arguments before, during other crises. The Galactic Council was very good at talking about problems. They were not so good at solving them. Finally, Morthak called for a formal vote. "All those in favor of the Murtai proposal for tribute negotiations?" Several sections lit up with approval signals. "All those in favor of the Ithoni proposal for economic sanctions?" More lights appeared. The voting continued through each proposal, but none of them received enough support to pass. "It appears we need more time to reach a consensus," Morthak announced. "I suggest we adjourn for today and continue discussions tomorrow." That was when Taemin stood up. The human representative was not a large man. At 63 years old, he was shorter than most of the other diplomats. His gray hair was thinning, and his simple black suit looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and decorations worn by other representatives. But when he rose to his feet, something in his manner made the entire chamber fall silent. "The humans will handle this," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the hall. The silence stretched on for several seconds. Then the chamber erupted in noise. Representatives turned to each other, their voices rising in excitement and concern. The translation computers struggled to keep up with the flood of different languages. Thyara was the first to speak clearly. Representative Taemin, surely you are not suggesting military action. The Zrathi Empire is one of the most powerful forces in this sector. They have conquered 17 worlds in the past decade. Taemin nodded slowly. I am aware of their record. Then you must understand that any attack would be suicide. Kelvani interjected. Her patterns had shifted to rapid flashing colors that indicated extreme agitation. The humans have only been part of the council for 20 years. Your military forces are limited. You cannot possibly stand against the entire Zrathi fleet. We don't need to stand against them, Taemin replied. We just need to remove them. Representative Zexthul of the Kethvar species made a sound like breaking glass. Remove them? 300 warships, thousands of soldiers, this is not a realistic plan. Taemin turned to face the crystal being. His eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made several of the closer representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Representative Zexthul, how many wars has your species fought in the last 1,000 years? Wars? We do not fight wars. We are a civilized people. We use diplomacy and economic pressure to resolve conflicts. And the Mertai? Taemin's gaze moved to Kelvani. We have not engaged in warfare for over 1,500 years, she admitted. We prefer to negotiate peaceful solutions. Taemin nodded and looked around the chamber. Athoni? Threnodi? Roxani? Each species gave similar answers. They were all peaceful peoples who had moved beyond the need for violence. They had evolved past such primitive behavior. Humans are different, Taemin said finally. We come from what you call a death world. Earth tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages, diseases, predators that could tear us apart with their bare claws. We learned to fight back because if we didn't, we would die. He paused and looked at the holographic display showing the Villani colony. Smoke was still rising from the burning cities. You talk about realistic plans and acceptable losses. You want to negotiate with killers and pay tribute to bullies. You think that sending medical supplies to victims is the same as helping them. Chamber was completely silent now. Every representative was focused on the small human who stood among them like a stone in a stream. We don't send help, Taemin continued, his voice growing stronger. Help implies that the problem might continue. Help means you expect the victims to keep suffering while you try to make things a little bit better. We don't do that. He touched a control on his wrist communicator. Above the platform, the display changed to show the Sol system. Earth hung in the center, surrounded by massive space stations and shipyards. Hundreds of warships moved between the planets like schools of metalfish. We send fleets, Taemin said. We send everything we have and we remove the problem completely. The display zoomed in to show one of the shipyards near Luna. Massive vessels were already moving away from their docking bays. The ships were larger than anything most of the council members had ever seen, covered in weapon systems and armor plating that looked designed for one purpose only. The third human expeditionary fleet is already on its way to Kepler 442b, Taemin announced. They will arrive in 4 days. The Zrathi will have until then to evacuate the system voluntarily. And if they refuse? Morthak asked quietly. Taemin looked at him with those calm, dangerous eyes. Then they will learn why humans don't negotiate with kidnappers. He sat back down in his chair, folding his hands in his lap once again. Around him, the Galactic Council erupted into chaos as representatives tried to process what they had just heard. But Taemin wasn't listening to them anymore. He was thinking about the Villani families he had seen in the holographic display, and about the human fleet that was already accelerating toward their world. The Zrathi had made a mistake. They had attacked innocent people, thinking that the galaxy was too civilized to fight back. They were about to learn that humans had never been civilized. They had just been waiting for a good reason to remind everyone else what they were capable of. Admiral Hyunwoo stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul, surrounded by screens showing star maps and fleet positions. The facility had been built 2 kilometers underground, protected by layers of rock and metal that could survive a direct nuclear strike. It was here that humanity coordinated its military operations across dozens of star systems. The authorization codes had arrived from the Galactic Council just 6 hours ago. Tayman's message was brief and to the point. Villani colony under attack by Zarathi Empire. Full response authorized. Show them what Deathworlders do to bullies. Hyunwoo smiled grimly as he read the message for the third time. He had served in the human military for 37 years, working his way up from a young lieutenant on a patrol ship to the admiral commanding humanity's largest battle fleet. He had seen action against pirates, rebels, and hostile alien forces. But this would be different. This would be the first time humans showed the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Status report, he called out to his staff. Commander Bora stepped forward, a tablet computer in her hands. She had been Hyunwoo's aide for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. 3rd Expeditionary Fleet is mobilizing from all major bases. Luna Station has launched 47 ships so far, including the dreadnought Iron Mountain. Mars. Orbital reports 32 vessels ready for departure. The Belt shipyards are sending everything they have available. How long until we reach full strength? 18 hours, sir. The fleet will rendezvous at Jump Point Alpha before proceeding to the target system. Hyunwoo nodded and turned to study the main display. It showed the Kepler 442 system, with the Villani colony world highlighted in red. Intelligence reports indicated that over 300 Zarathi warships were in orbit around the planet, with more arriving every hour. It was the largest enemy force humanity had ever faced. Most military commanders would be concerned about the odds. Hyunwoo was thinking about logistics. 300 ships meant a lot of wreckage to clean up afterward. Sir, Bora continued, the Galactic Council is requesting updates on our battle plans. They want assurances that we will limit civilian casualties and avoid unnecessary destruction. Tell the Council that we will handle this the human way, Hyunwoo replied. Civilian casualties will be minimal because we don't miss our targets. Destruction will be limited to enemy forces and anyone stupid enough to stand with them. Meanwhile, 300 kilometers above Earth's surface, Captain Soo-jin was aboard her ship making final preparations. The Iron Mountain was humanity's newest dreadnought, a massive vessel that stretched over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was covered with weapon systems that had been designed by people who understood the art of war. Railguns the size of office buildings. Missile tubes that could launch nuclear warheads across interstellar distances. Point defense grids that could turn incoming projectiles into superheated plasma. But the ship's most important cargo was not its weapons. It was the 200,000 Marines sleeping in the transport bays, waiting for their turn to deploy. First, Officer Do-hyun to the bridge, Soo-jin announced over the ship's communication system. Within minutes, her second-in-command appeared at her side. Do-hyun was a career military officer who had served on ships from the outer colonies to Earth itself. He was known for his attention to detail and his ability to stay calm under pressure. Right now, he looked slightly worried. Captain, I've been reviewing the intelligence reports on Zarathi combat doctrine, he said, holding up a tablet. They use heavy plasma weapons and combat mechs. Their soldiers are heavily armored and trained from birth for warfare. The Galactic Council estimates that any ground assault would result in severe casualties. Soo-jin took the tablet and scrolled through the data. Images of Zarathi warriors showed insect-like beings standing nearly 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating and forearms ending in sharp claws. Their weapons looked powerful enough to melt through tank armor. Impressive, she said, after a moment. They look like they would be dangerous opponents. Yes, ma'am. The tactical computers are recommending an extended bombardment campaign to soften their positions before attempting any landings. Soo-jin handed the tablet back to him. Do-hyun, what planet am I from? Earth, ma'am. And what do we call Earth? A death world, ma'am. Correct. Every day on Earth something tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the geology, the diseases. We learn to fight back against all of it. Do you think these Zarathi have ever faced anything worse than an angry human? Do-hyun considered this for a moment. Probably not, ma'am. Then let's show them what they're missing. On the frontier world of New Busan, Colonel Jiho was putting his Marines through combat exercises. The planet was almost as hostile as Earth itself, with toxic storms and predatory wildlife that made it perfect for training. His soldiers were volunteers from humanity's most dangerous professions. Deep-sea miners who worked in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans, volcano researchers who studied active lava flows, Arctic explorers who could survive in temperatures cold enough to freeze metal. To these men and women, alien warfare was just another extreme environment to master. "Listen up," Jiho shouted over the howling wind. His battalion was spread out across a rocky plateau, taking cover behind boulders while training drones flew overhead firing simulated weapons. "In 72 hours, we're going to drop onto a hostile world. The enemy thinks they're tough because they've conquered a few peaceful colonies. They have no idea what's coming." Sergeant Wu Jin raised his hand. He was a former storm chaser who had spent 10 years driving into hurricanes on Earth. "Sir, what's the mission parameters?" "Simple," Jiho replied. "Land on the planet. Find the bad guys. Remove them, extract the civilians. Go home. Rules of engagement? Anyone pointing a weapon at civilians is a target. Anyone trying to stop us from completing the mission is a target. Anyone who surrenders will be processed according to the Geneva Conventions, assuming they know what surrender means." The Marines grinned at that. They had trained for this kind of operation their entire careers. Each of them was equipped with powered armor that could withstand small arms fire and environmental hazards. Their weapons were designed to punch through any known armor material. But their most important advantage was simpler than that. They were human. They came from a world that had tried to kill them since the day they were born, and they had not only survived, but thrived. They had learned to see every challenge as something to be overcome, every enemy as another problem to solve. Combat medic Nari was checking her medical supplies when Jiho approached her. She had served in disaster zones across human space, treating everything from radiation poisoning to genetically modified plague outbreaks. "Doctor, are you ready for this?" he asked. Nari looked up from her equipment. "Colonel, I've treated survivors of a volcanic eruption on Titan. I've performed surgery in the middle of a hurricane on New Mumbai. I've kept people alive in zero gravity while under enemy fire. A few oversized insects don't scare me." "Good. Because you're going to be treating Volani civilians who have been held prisoner for weeks. They're going to need medical attention, and someone who can stay calm while the shooting is going on around them. I can handle both." Back in the Sol system, the human fleet was beginning to assemble. Ships arrived from dozens of different bases and installations, each one adding to the growing armada. Destroyers and cruisers, carriers and support vessels, all of them designed with one purpose in mind: to project human power across the galaxy. Admiral Hyunwoo watched the tactical display as more ships joined the formation. The Galactic Council representatives were sending increasingly urgent messages, asking for details about the human battle plan. They wanted reassurances that the response would be proportional to the threat. "Sir," Bora reported, "Council Leader Morthak is requesting a direct communication link. He says it's urgent." "Put him through." The holographic image of the crystalline being appeared in front of Hyunwoo's desk. Morthak's usual calm demeanor seemed strained. "Admiral, I must express the Council's concerns about your military response. Intelligence reports suggest you are assembling a fleet of unprecedented size. Surely this level of force is unnecessary." Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. "Council Leader, how many humans have been killed or enslaved by the Zrathi?" "Well, none, technically. But that is not the point. The Volani are the victims here." "Exactly. And when humans see innocent people being hurt, we respond appropriately. But Admiral, the Zrathi have offered to negotiate. They say they might be willing to reduce their territorial demands if suitable compensation is provided." Hyunwoo's expression darkened. "They want to be paid for kidnapping and enslaving an entire planet? It is not ideal, but it could prevent a costly war." "Council Leader," Hyunwoo interrupted, "let me explain something about humans. We don't negotiate with kidnappers. We don't pay tribute to bullies. And we don't leave our friends to suffer while we debate the proper response." The communication link went dead. Morthak's image flickered and disappeared. "Bora," Hyunwoo called out. "Yes, sir?" "Send a message to all fleet commanders. Tell them the mission is simple. Remove the Zrathi from Vellani space. Use whatever force is necessary. And the Council's concerns about proportional response? Hyunwoo smiled coldly. Tell them that High Commander Vexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the orbital displays with satisfaction. The Vellani colony world spread out below, them like a blue-green jewel, now firmly under Zrathi control. 300 of the Empire's finest warships filled the space around the planet, while thousands of warriors patrolled the surface. The conquest had gone exactly as planned. The Vellani had offered no resistance, just as intelligence reports had predicted. They were weak, peaceful creatures who cared more about art and philosophy than defending themselves. Perfect slaves for the Empire's mining operations. Status report, Vexithar commanded, his mandibles clicking together in the Zrathi equivalent of satisfaction. Sub-Commander Thexakul approached the command platform. Like all Zrathi, he stood nearly 3 meters tall with thick armor plating, covering his insect-like body. 4 powerful arms ended in razor-sharp claws, and his compound eyes could track multiple targets simultaneously. The mining operations are proceeding ahead of schedule, High Commander, Thexakul reported. The Vellani workers are proving more efficient than expected. Fear is an excellent motivator. Vexthar's mandibles clicked again. Excellent. How long until we have extracted enough minerals to satisfy the Emperor's demands? At current rates, approximately 6 months. However, we could increase efficiency by reducing food rations for the slaves. Do it. The weaker ones will die, but the strong will work harder to avoid the same fate. As the 2 Zrathi commanders discussed their plans for exploiting the captured population, a junior officer approached with obvious nervousness. War leader Kexathane was young for his rank, but he had earned his position through exceptional skill in battle. High Commander, Kexathane said, his voice carefully controlled. We are detecting incoming ships at the edge of the system. Vexithar turned his attention to the tactical displays. 12 contacts appeared on the screen, moving inward from the system's outer boundary. Reinforcements from the Empire? No, sir. The signatures don't match any known Zrathi vessel types. Then who are they? Kexathane hesitated for a moment. According to our database, they appear to be human ships, sir. The bridge fell silent. Vexithar stared at the display, trying to process this information. Humans were barely known to the Empire, a recent addition to the Galactic Council with limited territory and influence. What were they doing here? 12 ships, Vexthar asked. Yes, sir. Against 300? Yes, sir. Vexthar's mandibles spread wide in what might have been amusement. Either these humans are incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Sub-Commander Thexakul studied the sensor readings more carefully. High Commander, these ships are larger than our intelligence reports indicated. The lead vessel appears to be over 2 kilometers in length. Size means nothing without proper weapons, Vexthar replied. The Galactic Council species are all the same. They build impressive-looking ships but fill them with scientific equipment instead of guns, probably hoping to intimidate us with their appearance. Should we hail them, sir? Offer them a chance to withdraw? Vexthar considered this. The humans had no business in this system, but they were technically members of the Galactic Council. Destroying their ships without provocation might cause political complications later. Open a communication channel, he ordered. The main display flickered, but no image appeared. Instead, a calm human voice filled the bridge. Zrathi vessels, this is Captain Sujin of the human ship Iron Mountain. You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate this system and release all Vellani prisoners. This is your only warning. The bridge crew looked at each other in amazement. Sub-Commander Thexkul's compound eyes bulged with surprise. Did she just give us an ultimatum? Vexthar was too shocked to respond immediately. In his 40 years of military service, he had never heard anything quite so absurd. 12 ships demanding that 300 withdraw? It was beyond arrogance. It was insanity. Human vessel, he finally replied, his voice dripping with contempt. You are outnumbered 25-1. Your ships are surrounded by the finest warriors in the galaxy. Withdraw immediately, or we will destroy you. There was a pause before the human captain responded. Hi, Commander Vexthar. Let me explain something about humans. When we say 1 hour, we mean 1 hour. When we say evacuate, we mean leave. And when we say only warning, we mean exactly that. You dare threaten the Zarathi Empire? I'm not threatening you. I'm educating you. You have 58 minutes. The communication link went dead. Vexithar stared at the display showing the 12 human ships. They had not changed course or reduced speed. They were not deploying into defensive formations or requesting reinforcements. They were simply moving toward his fleet as if 300 Zarathi warships were no more dangerous than space debris. Hi, Commander, Kexthane said quietly. What are your orders? Vexthar's mind raced through the possibilities. This could be a trap, some sort of elaborate deception. Perhaps the humans had cloaked ships hidden throughout the system. Or maybe they had some new weapon technology that intelligence reports had missed. But the most likely explanation was simple. The humans were fools who had no idea what they were facing. All ships prepare for battle, he commanded. We will teach these mammals what happens when they interfere with the Empire. The Zarathi fleet began moving into attack formation. 300 warships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the approaching human vessels. Plasma cannons charged to full power, missile tubes loaded with enough firepower to crack a moon, point defense systems activated to intercept any incoming projectiles. Vexthar felt a familiar excitement building in his chest. The Zarathi were born for war. Their entire culture revolved around conquest and domination. These humans, whatever their plan might be, were about to learn why the Empire had never lost a major battle. 57 minutes remaining, Kexthane reported. They won't need 57 minutes to die, Vexthar replied. But as the minutes ticked by, something strange began to happen. The human ships did not slow down or attempt to negotiate. They did not try to maneuver around the Zarathi fleet or find a tactical advantage. They simply continued moving forward in a straight line, as if the 300 enemy warships didn't exist. At 20 minutes, Vexthar began to feel the first stirrings of unease. The human ships were now close enough for detailed scans, and the results were disturbing. The lead vessel, the one called Iron Mountain, was covered with weapon systems unlike anything in the Zarathi database. Railguns that looked large enough to punch through a battleship's armor. Missile pods that could saturate an entire orbital zone with nuclear warheads. Hi, Commander, Thexcool reported, his voice strained. These weapons, they're designed for ship-to-ship combat, not exploration or scientific research. All species build warships, Vexthar replied, but his confidence was beginning to waver. The question is whether they know how to use them. At 10 minutes, the human ships began to spread out into battle formation. But it was not the defensive arrangement that most species would adopt when facing overwhelming odds. Instead, they formed an aggressive attack pattern, with the largest ships taking point positions and smaller vessels moving to provide support fire. Hi, Commander, Kexthane said. They're acting like they intend to attack us. 12 ships against 300? Impossible. They must be planning to ram us. A suicide mission. But even as he said it, Vexthar knew that didn't make sense. Either. The humans could have sent automated ships if they wanted to cause damage through ramming attacks. Why would they put crews aboard vessels intended for suicide missions? At 5 minutes, something unprecedented happened. Every human ship in the fleet opened fire simultaneously. The space between the two forces erupted in light and energy. Railgun projectiles moving at significant fractions of the speed of light slammed into Zarathi vessels before their crews even realized they were under attack. Nuclear missiles detonated in perfect synchronized explosions that turned entire squadrons into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Vexthar watched in horror as the left flank of his fleet simply disappeared. 50 ships gone in the first salvo. The right flank fared little better, with dozens more vessels crippled or destroyed by weapons that seemed impossible powerful. Return fire, he screamed. All ships, return fire. The surviving Zarathi vessels unleashed their own barrage. Plasma bolts and particle beams lanced out toward the human fleet. But the enemy ships seemed to dance between the incoming fire, their point defense systems intercepting everything that came close to hitting them. And they kept shooting. The second human salvo arrived 30 seconds after the first. This time, they concentrated their fire on the Zrathi command ships, the large vessels that coordinated fleet movements. Vexthar watched his tactical display as red icons disappeared one by one, each representing hundreds of warriors and years of military construction. How is this possible? Thexkul whispered. 12 ships cannot defeat 300, but they were doing exactly that. The human vessels moved through the Zrathi fleet like predators hunting prey, their weapons finding targets with deadly precision. They did not fight like any species the Empire had encountered before. There was no hesitation, no attemper. While Captain Sujin's fleet finished destroying the remaining Zrathi ships in orbit, the real shock was about to begin on the planet's surface. Colonel Jiho stood in the transport bay of the Iron Mountain, watching his Marines make final equipment checks. 200,000 soldiers prepared for deployment, each one a volunteer from Earth's most dangerous environments. Listen up. Jiho's voice carried clearly through the massive bay. Intelligence reports show Zrathi forces concentrated in 12 major cities. They're using the Villani civilians as human shields, expecting us to be careful about collateral damage. Sergeant Wu Jin raised his hand. The former storm chaser had survived 3 hurricanes and 2 tornadoes before joining the Marines. Sir, are we being careful about collateral damage? We're being precise, Jiho replied. Every shot we fire will hit exactly what we aim at. Nothing more, nothing less. The Zrathi will learn the difference between human precision and alien carelessness. The colonel activated a holographic display showing the planet below. Red markers indicated enemy positions, while blue dots showed known civilian refugee camps. Standard deployment pattern. Drop pods directly onto target zones. No staging areas, no secure perimeters, no gradual advances. We hit them hard and fast before they know what's happening. The Marines grinned at that. They had trained for this kind of operation their entire careers. Unlike other species who preferred cautious, methodical approaches to warfare, humans had learned to strike like lightning, hit the enemy where they least expected it with overwhelming force and absolute determination. Medic Nari, Jiho called out. The combat medic stepped forward, her medical equipment secured to her powered armor. She had treated disaster victims across human space, working in conditions that would kill most other species. Yes, sir? You'll be in the first wave, along with Chaplain Minho and the humanitarian team. The Villani civilians have been prisoners for weeks. They're going to be scared, injured, and probably don't trust anyone at this point. Understood, sir. What about the Zrathi guards? Leave them to us. The drop began exactly 23 minutes after the last enemy ship exploded in orbit. Transport pods launched from human vessels in perfect formation, their heat shields glowing as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Each pod contained 50 Marines and enough equipment to fight a small war. The Zrathi had never seen anything like it. Ground Force Commander Rexthul watched from his command bunker as hundreds of metal objects fell from the sky like burning stars. His troops were positioned throughout the city, with heavy weapons emplacements and combat mechs guarding every major intersection. What is the status of our orbital support? He demanded. Communications Officer Zalkex tried several frequencies before responding. Sir, I cannot reach any ships in orbit. All communication channels are silent. Rexthul felt a cold chill run through his exoskeleton. The High Commander had assured him that the human fleet would be destroyed within hours. Had something gone? Wrong, sir. War Leader Nexthor burst into the command bunker. Enemy drop pods are landing throughout the city. Hundreds of them. How many troops? Unknown, sir. Our sensors are being jammed. But the landing pattern suggests a full-scale invasion. Force. Rexthul studied the tactical display. The human drop pods were not landing in safe zones or establishing defensible positions. Instead, they were coming down directly on top of Zrathi strong points. Command posts, weapon depots, communication centers. Every important target was being hit simultaneously. It's a suicide mission, he realized. They're trying to cause maximum damage before we can organize a proper response. But as reports began coming in from across the city, Rexthul started to understand that this was not a suicide mission. It was something far worse. Sergeant Wu Jin kicked open the door to his drop pod and immediately took cover behind a concrete barrier. The pod had landed exactly where it was supposed to, 50 meters from a Zarathi weapons depot that supplied the entire northern district. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air above his head as enemy soldiers opened fire from fortified positions. "Contact front," he called into his radio. "Multiple hostiles, heavily armed." "Copy that, Sergeant," came Colonel Jiho's voice. "Rules of engagement are in effect. Anyone pointing weapons at civilians is a target." Wu Jin smiled grimly and checked his assault rifle. The weapon used caseless ammunition designed to punch through any known armor material. Like everything else in human military equipment, it had been built by people who understood that sometimes you needed to kill things that were trying to kill you. "Martinez, Chen, flank left," he ordered. "Kim, Patel, provide covering fire. We're taking that depot." The 5 Marines moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained together for 2 years, learning to work as a unit in environments that ranged from Arctic wastelands to underwater facilities. Fighting oversized insects in an alien city was just another day at the office. The Zarathi soldiers in the depot were well armed and well trained. They had conquered 17 worlds using tactics that emphasized overwhelming firepower and brutal efficiency. But they had never faced opponents who treated their fortifications like inconvenient obstacles rather than serious threats. Wu Jin's team moved through the depot like wolves hunting sheep. The Zarathi weapons, impressive as they were, could not track targets that moved within human speed and precision. The aliens had trained to fight other aliens, beings who approached warfare with caution and calculation. Humans approached warfare like a natural disaster, fast, violent, and utterly unstoppable. Within 10 minutes, the depot was secure. Wu Jin stood among the wreckage, counting enemy casualties while his team searched for intelligence materials. 23 Zarathi soldiers had been eliminated with 0 human losses. "Depot secure," he reported. "Moving to secondary objective." Similar scenes were playing out across the city. Human Marines moved through Zarathi positions like a virus spreading through a computer network. Every strong point fell within minutes of being attacked. Every defensive position collapsed as soon as the humans arrived. Combat medic Nari was with the humanitarian team that hit the main civilian detention center. The Zarathi had converted a school into a prison camp, cramming thousands of Villani families into buildings designed for a few hundred students. The conditions were horrific: overcrowding, inadequate food, no medical care for the sick and injured. The Zarathi guards had not expected a direct assault on the prison. They were still trying to organize their defenses when the human drop pods landed in the school courtyard. Nari was out of her pod and moving toward the nearest building before the guards knew what was happening. "Medic!" Corporal Sun Ho called out. "Multiple wounded civilians in Building 3. Nari grabbed her medical kit and ran toward the indicated structure. Plasma fire erupted around her as Zarathi soldiers tried to stop the rescue operation. She ignored the weapons fire and focused on her job: saving lives. The first thing she saw inside the building was a young Villani child, barely alive after weeks of malnutrition and abuse. The child's parents stood nearby, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. They had no idea who these armored figures were or why they had come. "It's okay," Nari said gently, her voice carrying through her armor's external speakers. She knelt beside the child and began checking vital signs. "We're here to help. You're safe now." The Villani parents stared at her in amazement. For weeks, they had heard nothing but Zarathi voices barking orders and making threats. The sound of someone offering help in a gentle tone was almost impossible to believe. Who are you?" the child's mother whispered. "We're humans," Nari replied as she administered emergency medicine. "We came to take you home." Outside, the sound of weapons fire was already dying down. The human Marines had neutralized the Zarathi guards with their usual efficiency, turning a defended position into a secure area in less than 15 minutes. Colonel Jiho's voice crackled over the communication network. "All teams, report status. Detention Center Alpha secure. came one reply. Government complex taken, reported another team. Mining facility liberated, said a third. Spaceport under our control. The reports continued for several minutes as human forces swept through the city like wildfire. Every major Zarathi position had been hit simultaneously, with devastating results for the occupying forces. Ground Force Commander Rex Thule listened to the disaster reports with growing horror. In less than an hour, his army had been shattered, command posts destroyed, weapon depots captured, communication networks disrupted. His troops were scattered and demoralized, cut off from supplies and reinforcements. Sir, Communications Officer Zalkex reported, we're receiving surrender requests from multiple units. Surrender? Rex Thule could barely comprehend what he was hearing. Zarathi warriors do not surrender. Sir, they're not surrendering to other warriors. They're surrendering to whatever these humans are. Rex Thule looked at the tactical display one more time. Red markers showing friendly forces were disappearing at an alarming rate, while blue markers representing enemy positions spread across the map like an infection. The humans were not just winning, they were completely overwhelming his forces. Sir, War Leader Nexthor said quietly, we need to evacuate. If we can reach the secondary command bunker. No. Rex Thule's voice was hollow. Send a message to all remaining units. Tell them to lay down on the Galactic Council station. Representatives from dozens of species watched the tactical feeds in stunned silence. The massive viewing chamber had been filled with anxious chatter just hours before, as delegates debated the wisdom of humanity's military intervention. Now the only sound was the quiet hum of life support systems and the occasional click or whistle from species trying to process what they had just witnessed. Council Leader Morthak stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form reflecting the light from the holographic displays showing the Kepler 442 system. The images were hard to believe. 12 human ships had destroyed a fleet of 300 Zarathi vessels in less than 15 minutes. The orbital battle had been so one-sided that it barely qualified as combat. Status report, Morthak requested, his voice echoing strangely in the silent chamber. Technical Coordinator Veltana, a spider-like being from the Arachnid Collective, manipulated several control interfaces with her 8 arms. The tactical analysis is complete, Council Leader. The Zarathi fleet has been eliminated. Total human losses. 0 ships destroyed. Minimal damage to 3 vessels. Estimated Zarathi casualties. Approximately 50,000 personnel. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled representatives. Representative Kelvani of the Mirtai people, her skin patterns flashing rapid sequences of blue and silver, spoke first. 50,000? In 15 minutes? The ground campaign is showing similar results, Veltana continued. Human forces have secured all major population centers on the planet. Zarathi ground troops are surrendering en masse. Civilian casualties among the Villani appear to be minimal. Representative Thiara of the Ithoni people ruffled her feathers, nervously. This is unprecedented. No military force in recorded galactic history has achieved such rapid victory against a peer opponent. The Zarathi were not peer opponents, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Taimin entering the chamber, flanked by his aide Bora. The human diplomat looked tired, but satisfied as he took his place at the human delegations section. Council. Leader Morthak's crystalline features shifted to face the human representative. Representative Taimin, we need to discuss the implications of this military action. The level of force used was far beyond what the situation required. Taimin settled into his chair and studied the tactical displays for a moment. Council Leader, how many Villani civilians are still prisoners? According to the latest reports, none. The human forces have liberated all detention facilities. And how many Zarathi ships remain in the system? None that are operational. Then the situation has been resolved. Taimin folded his hands in his lap. I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Representative Zexthul of the Kethvar species made a sound like grinding crystal. Representative Taimin, your forces have destroyed an entire fleet. Thousands of beings are dead. This level of violence is barbaric. Barbaric? Taimin's voice remained calm. but there was something in his tone that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. The Zrathi invaded a peaceful world, enslaved the population, and forced them to work in mines under threat of death. When we offered them the chance to leave voluntarily, they refused. What would you have had us do? Negotiate. Kelvani's patterns flashed angry red. Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure. There are always alternatives to war. Are there? Taman touched a control on his wrist communicator. The main display changed to show recordings from the Villani detention centers before human forces arrived. Images of overcrowded prison camps, malnourished children and Zrathi guards beating anyone who complained about conditions. The chamber fell silent again. These are the results of negotiation and diplomatic pressure, Taman said quietly. The Galactic Council knew about this situation for weeks. You debated and discussed and formed committees while innocent people suffered. How many Villani children died while you were trying to find a peaceful solution? Representative Thiara's feathers drooped. We were trying to prevent a larger conflict. The Zrathi Empire has dozens of worlds under their control. If we provoked them, if you provoked them, they might have attacked someone else? Taman's expression hardened. So your plan was to let the Villani suffer indefinitely, rather than risk making the bullies angry? Bora leaned forward and whispered something to Taman. He nodded and activated another display, this one showing real-time footage from the liberated planet. Human medics were treating Villani civilians, engineers were restoring power systems, and soldiers were helping families return to their homes. This is what happens when you actually solve problems instead of managing them, Taman said. The Villani are free. The Zrathi threat has been eliminated, and it took less than a day to accomplish what your diplomatic efforts couldn't achieve in months. Council Leader Morthak's crystalline form shifted colors indicating deep thought. Representative Taman, I must ask about your species' future intentions. The military capability your fleet demonstrated today is concerning. Many Council members are worried about humanity's role in galactic affairs. Before Taman could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency communication channels activated, bringing urgent messages from across the galaxy. Council Leader, Veltana reported, her 8 arms working frantically at the control interfaces. We're receiving reports from multiple systems. Several ongoing conflicts have suddenly ended. Ended how? The aggressors are requesting immediate peace negotiations. The hegemony of Talnoth has withdrawn from the 3 systems they were invading. The Crimson Fleet pirates have released all their prisoners and are fleeing toward the Galactic Rim. The territorial dispute between the Methane Collective and the Silicon Republic has been resolved in favor of maintaining current borders. Morthak's colors shifted through several confused patterns. I don't understand. These conflicts have been ongoing for years. Why would they suddenly end now? Taman smiled slightly. Word travels fast in this galaxy. Every species with aggressive tendencies just watched 12 human ships destroy 300 Zrathi vessels without breaking a sweat. They're reconsidering their priorities. Representative Kelvani's patterns had shifted to pale, frightened colors. You're saying that your military demonstration was intended to intimidate other species? I'm saying that bullies understand strength better than words, Taman replied. The Zrathi thought they could prey on peaceful worlds because no one was willing to stop them. Now everyone knows that's not true anymore. But the implications... Representative Zexthul's crystalline voice cracked with stress. If humans are willing to use this level of force against anyone who threatens council members, then maybe people will stop threatening council members, Bora interjected. She had been listening to the debate in silence, but now she stood and activated a new display. In the past 6 hours, we've received formal requests for human peacekeeping forces from 12 different systems, not military conquest, peacekeeping. They want us to prevent conflicts, not start them. The display showed a map of human space and the surrounding regions. Dozens of communication channels were active, carrying requests for assistance, offers of trade agreements and applications for defensive alliances. They're not afraid of us, Bora continued. They're relieved. For the first time in centuries, there's a galactic power that will actually stop aggressors instead of negotiating with them. Representative Thiara looked at the display with growing understanding. The balance of power is shifting. Species that have relied on intimidation and conquest are suddenly vulnerable, while peaceful worlds know they have protection. Exactly, Taemin said. The Galactic Council was created to promote peace and cooperation, but it had no way to enforce those values. Now it does. Council leader Morthak was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of what he was hearing. Finally, he spoke. Representative Taemin, what assurances can humanity provide that this military capability will not be used for conquest? The same assurance we've always provided, Taemin replied. Our actions. Humans have been members of this council for 20 years. In that time, we have never invaded another species' territory, never demanded tribute or forced trade agreements, never used our military to coerce other governments. We only fight when innocent people are threatened. And if someone threatens human worlds, then they'll learn why we don't negotiate with aggressors. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives turned to each other, debating the implications of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Some species were worried about human dominance, while others were excited about the prospect of real protection from aggressive neighbors. But amid all the debate, one fact was becoming clear. The galaxy had changed. The old system of diplomatic protests and economic sanctions had been replaced by something more direct and more effective. Representative Kelvani, her patterns now showing resigned acceptance, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What happens now? Taemin stood and looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien representatives. Now you have a choice. You can continue handling conflicts the old way, with endless debates and committees while innocent people suffer. Or you can learn through. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the galaxy had settled into a new rhythm. The Zrathi Empire, once feared across dozens of star systems, had formally requested a peace treaty with humanity, not because they had been defeated in a single battle, but because they had been educated about the true nature of the species they had challenged. High Commander Vexthar, survivor of the orbital massacre, stood in the conference room aboard the human dreadnought Iron Mountain. The Zrathi warrior who had once commanded 300 ships now represented his people as they sought to understand the new galactic order. Across the table sat Admiral Hyunwoo, the human fleet commander whose forces had changed the balance of power throughout the spiral arm. We underestimated your species, Vexthar admitted, his mandibles clicking with what humans had learned was embarrassment among his kind. We thought you were like the others in the Galactic Council, cautious, political, concerned with minimal casualties and diplomatic solutions. Admiral Hyunwoo poured himself a cup of coffee from a thermal carafe that had accompanied him through 3 interstellar conflicts. The simple ceramic mug looked out of place on the polished metal table, but it represented something important to the human commander. Continuity, reliability, the idea that some things remained constant even when everything else changed. The others fight wars, Hyunwoo said, taking a sip of the hot liquid. We solve problems. When someone threatens innocent people, we don't calculate acceptable losses or negotiate reasonable responses. We remove the threat. Vexithar's compound eyes focused on the human admiral. The Zrathi had spent months studying human military doctrine, trying to understand how 12 ships had accomplished what seemed impossible. The answer they had discovered was not in superior technology or numerical advantages. It was in the fundamental difference between how humans and other species approached conflict. Your ships were outnumbered 25-1, Vexthar said. Yet your crews showed no hesitation, no fear. They fought as if victory was inevitable. Because it was, Hyunwoo replied simply. Not because of our weapons or our ships, but because of our purpose. We came to free the Vellani. That meant the Zrathi forces had to be removed. The only question was how long it would take. The Zrathi commander processed this information. You fought like your world was trying to kill you every day. Because it did, Hyunwoo set down his coffee cup and activated a holographic display showing Earth. The blue-green planet looked peaceful from space, but the data overlays told a different story. Storm systems that could destroy cities. Tectonic activity that could split continents, predators that had evolved specifically to hunt the planet's dominant species. Every human alive today is descended from survivors, Hyunwoo continued. Our ancestors faced ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and predators that could tear them apart with bare claws. Those who couldn't adapt died. Those who could learned to fight back against anything that threatened them or their families. Vexithar studied the Earth data with growing understanding. Your entire species was forged by conflict, not forged by it, improved by it. Earth didn't make us killers, it made us protectors. When we see innocent people suffering, we don't debate whether intervention is justified. We act. The peace negotiations had been surprisingly straightforward. The Zarathi Empire had three options: continue fighting a species that had demonstrated overwhelming military superiority, attempt to hide from human forces while maintaining their aggressive policies, or change their approach to galactic relations entirely. They had chosen the third option. The Empire is withdrawing from all occupied territories, Vexthar reported. We are returning stolen property and releasing all prisoners. Our military forces are being restructured for defense rather than conquest. And the other aggressive species in this sector? Most have made similar decisions. The hegemony of Talnoth has ended their expansion campaigns. The Crimson Fleet pirates have disbanded entirely. Even the territorial disputes that have lasted for decades are being resolved through negotiation. Hyunwoo nodded approvingly. Fear is a powerful teacher. Is that what you intended? To frighten the galaxy into peace? The human admiral considered this question carefully. We intended to free the Villani and eliminate the threat to their survival. If other species learned from that demonstration, it saved everyone a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, throughout human space, the military was adapting to its new role in galactic affairs. Captain Sujin, now promoted to Commodore, stood on the bridge of her flagship reviewing patrol reports. The Iron Mountain and her sister ships had become a symbol of peace throughout the region, their mere presence enough to end conflicts before they could begin. Status report, she requested from her first officer. Commander Do-hyun approached, with a data tablet. We've completed our patrol of the Centauri sector. No hostile activities detected. The disputed mining rights issue between the Methane Collective and the Crystalline Alliance has been resolved through arbitration. Any requests for human intervention? 3 systems have asked for peacekeeping forces to help mediate trade disputes.
All voluntary requests? No emergency situations? Sujin smiled slightly. 6 months ago, the galaxy had been full of small conflicts and aggressive expansion campaigns. Now, species were actively seeking human assistance to prevent problems.
Before they started. Not because humans were conquerors, but because everyone knew they would enforce whatever agreements were reached. Approved. Send Destroyer Squadron 7 to handle the mediations, full diplomatic protocols. On the surface of the liberated Villani colony world, the changes were even more dramatic. Colonel Jiho walked through the rebuilt capital city, watching Villani children play in parks that had been prison camps just months before. The reconstruction efforts had been completed in record time, with human engineers working alongside Villani architects to restore everything that had been destroyed. Colonel, Medic Nari approached from the hospital where she had been treating the last of the former prisoners. Final medical report. All survivors have recovered from their captivity. Psychological counseling programs are showing excellent results. Any ongoing security concerns? None. The remaining Zarathi forces integrated into the rebuilding effort surprisingly well. Turns out they're decent engineers when they're not trying to conquer people. Jiho nodded and looked up at the sky, where human patrol ships maintained a watchful presence. The Villani had asked for the patrols to continue, not because they feared another invasion, but because they wanted to contribute to the new peacekeeping system that was spreading throughout the galaxy. Back on the Galactic Council station, the political implications of humanity's actions were becoming clear. Representative Tai Min sat in his office reviewing requests for human involvement in various disputes and conflicts. His aide Bo-Ra had been working 16-hour days just to process all the communications from species seeking assistance. Status report.
Taemin said as Bo-Ra entered with another stack of data tablets. 47 new requests for human peacekeeping forces this week, she reported. 23 trade dispute mediations, 12 border security consultations, 8 anti-piracy operations, and 4 requests for protective escorts for scientific expeditions. All voluntary? Every single one. No government is asking us to intervene against their will. They want our help because they know we'll actually solve their problems instead of just managing them. Taemin leaned back in his chair and thought about the changes he had witnessed over the past 6 months. The Galactic Council had evolved from a debating society into an actual peacekeeping organization. Not through reforms or reorganization, but simply by having one member species willing to enforce its principles. Any complaints from other council members? Fewer than expected. Representative Kelvani of the Mertai initially objected to human militarization of council policies, but even she has requested human assistance with pirate attacks on their shipping lanes. And the Kethvar. Representative Zexthul publicly praised human efficiency in resolving the Crystalline Alliance trade dispute. He called it the most effective diplomatic intervention in council history. Taemin smiled at that. The Crystal beings had been among humanity's harshest critics, but they had also been among the first to benefit from human peacekeeping efforts. When faced with a choice between endless negotiations and quick resolutions, most species discovered they preferred results over process. The transformation was not limited to military matters. Human trading vessels moved freely throughout the galaxy, protected by the reputation of their military fleet. Scientific expeditions from Earth explored previously dangerous regions, knowing that any threats would be dealt with quickly and decisively. Cultural exchange programs flourished as species that had been afraid to interact due to aggressive neighbors now felt safe to explore new relationships. In his final report to Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo summarized the changes that had occurred since the Battle of Kepler 442. Piracy in the local sectors has been reduced by 93%. Territorial disputes have decreased by 87%. Trade volume has increased by 42% as shipping lanes previously considered too dangerous have been secured. Requests for human diplomatic assistance have tripled every month.